This time we review the Triumph Tiger 100 and ask, is it the perfect first classic? You may remember a few weeks ago we did a video covering the history of the Triumph Tiger 100. So today is a follow-up. I thought we'd do a road test of a Tiger 100 like the one we've got here.
But as it's my Type 100, I think I'll talk about it.
She's a 1964 model, 490cc, and she's got 4 gears. She's fitted with a single monoblock carburettor and points ignition. The clutch is nice and light, and the gear selection is really easy, and although it is on the wrong side of modern bikes, it is 1 down and 3 up, just like a normal modern bike is. She's very light and easy to handle. She corners well, as I found out today. There is some vibration, but at 60 miles an hour normal road speed, you can't really tell. It's not that bad at all. In true Triumph fashion, she does leak a bit of oil, but it doesn't go over the back tyre and it doesn't really cause many problems. It has a single leading shoe brake, which is quite powerful for its age. The clutch is light, and in general, the bike is light and easy to handle. Unlike many other models, this one hasn't got a rev counter, but really it doesn't matter. It's a lovely flexible engine, and it doesn't matter which gear you're in, it will pull away. Top speed is 100 miles an hour, but I have no intention of going that fast. Basically, it's a beautiful bike for pottering around country lanes.
So as Deb said, these are lovely, usable little bikes, and they make a wonderful first classic. The engine is really simple and very basic. It's easy to work on. There's nothing complicated about it at all. Very user friendly. The controls are lovely and light. The seat height is low. You know, if you're a lady or a small person and you want to get into classics, these really are a great bike to go for. And for anybody really, the Tiger 100 makes an excellent choice if you want to get into the classic world. Now while Deb is out on the road, we'll give a brief summary of the model's history. Now, contrary to popular belief, the Tiger 100, which arrived in 1939, was not Triumph's first vertical twin. They'd actually built a prototype way back in 1914, although the first parallel twin to reach production was actually the 6th one of 1933. But it's with the introduction of Edward Turner's Speed Twin in late 1937 that we really see the history of this particular machine begin. But the original Tiger 100 didn't have long to establish itself. With the advent of World War II, production ended in 1940. But production would restart again, initially the Speed Twin and later the Tiger 100, in 1946, with the machines little changed from their pre-war guise, save the introduction of telescopic fork front suspension, of course. Although in point of fact, the unit construction machine seen here is actually descended from the 3TA, which arrived in 1957, with the Tiger 100 going to unit construction in 1960. And while some will tell you that the unit construction engine is little more than a modification of the early pre-unit job, this is not correct. The engine is very different in pretty much all ways. The essential layout is the same in the basic configuration. The engine in fact shares few components with its predecessor, and even the engine's basic bore and stroke dimensions are quite different, with the new engine running a much shorter stroke. In their early unit models, Triumph had attempted to preach the gospel of full rear wheel enclosure, advertising the bike as a machine with a wheel in tomorrow. Not everybody was convinced by this, although you did see an abbreviated form of the rear wheel enclosure on the more sporting Tiger 100 for a while. Although as the 60s went on, this became gradually less obvious and eventually faded away completely. Many riders in fact would just remove the rear wheel enclosure and leave the mudguards on show because it just looked better. Early machines featured the swan neck frame, which amazingly used the fuel tank as a stressed member. Fortunately, Triumph would see the folly of this and add a bolt-in bracing in later models. The initial model was listed as the T100A, but it would be joined by the SS and the C in later years, and of course the twin-carb Daytona from 1968. The final Tiger 100s featured the beefed-up bottom end from the Daytona and would last in production until 1973. The Tiger 100 features an engine of 490cc with a bore and stroke of 69 by 65.5. Like most Triumphs, it runs a twin camshaft setup with camshafts running fore and after the cylinder block, which powers push rods housing external tubes to the overhead valves. The compression ratio is quoted at 9:1, although it can vary from different models, with horsepower variously quoted at 32 or 34 horsepower at 7,000 RPM. With very late models claiming around 38 horsepower. The machine uses dry sump lubrication and the oil tank can be found on the right hand side of the frame. And the oil was moved around by a 2-plunger pump system, regarded as rather old fashioned even in its time. The frame is the notoriously flimsy looking swan neck job, although by the mid-60s this had now been given an extra bolt-on brace just to add a bit more rigidity. And while the frame was certainly not best in class, it did have the virtue of being very lightweight, with the bike weighing in at just 165 kilos or 364 pounds, gifting the machine that nippy, manoeuvrable feel that Mrs. Bikadoo likes so much. Also adding to the accessibility of the bike is the low seat height at just 745mm or 29.3 inches. The suspension units are of good quality by the standards of the time, and the 7-inch drums front and rear do a surprisingly good job of making the bike stop. Putting all that aside, there's no denying that the Triumph Tiger 100 is a looker.
By way of a follow-up to our previous video on the Tiger 100, we are testing a Tiger 100. And a very pleasant little bike it is too. One of the things that's very noticeable about a Tiger 100 is just how light and nippy it feels. The frame is a bit skimpy when you compare it to some other bikes of the era. I mean, it's no featherbed, but given the way that most of these machines are used today, you've got to ask yourself, does that really matter? Because the fact is, this machine is not unpleasant. You do get some vibration on a British Power Twin, obviously, but on the smaller bikes it's not too noticeable. It's just fairly smooth. I wouldn't say it was as smooth as a pre-unit, and that's definitely the case. They're not as smooth as pre-unit bikes, but they're not bad actually. But it really depends how you ride them. I think if you go flogging the guts out of these things, as we found with the old Tiger 90, at higher RPMs they vibrate as well as anything. I mean, they really do buzz. Controls you see are very simple. This particular version doesn't have a rev counter, although a lot of them did. This is quite an early version and doesn't have it. It was installed later. Does have the braced frame, doesn't using the, you see the brace just there under the yoke, so it's not using the tank as a stress member. I'm very glad to say. I think the swan neck frames don't inspire confidence. This is a swan neck frame, it's just they did add bracing to it later on. I think obviously you've got 4 speeds. You get to around 50, there is some buzziness mostly through the pegs. It's not terrible. I think the smoothest British twin I've ridden so far has been the A7, which I thought was absolutely marvellous. This isn't bad at all. You can certainly tolerate this for quite a lot of miles. So these machines, obviously Tiger 100 indicates top speed of 100 miles an hour and it's about 35 horsepower. 100 miles an hour, probably a bit optimistic if I'm honest, unless you find a really big hill. But certainly it'll get up into the 90s. Should you be riding a bike of this age at those speeds? Probably not really. I think you should be a little bit more responsible, if I'm honest. I think you don't buy these things to... Actually, I'm good God, that thing's noisy, isn't it? Hopefully you can hear the Triumph. Makes a nice sound, quite a muted sound. Being a 1960s bike, Triumphs were, you know, quite civilised machines really. So this one is no exception. It's quite a muted sound, it's fairly quiet. It's not deafening by any stretch. Not antisocial. The neighbours won't hate you if you buy one of these, that's for sure. Pretty good selling bike in the day. Obviously replaced the pre-unit machine, which was more expensive to make. Obviously some of the sporty pre-units have aluminium barrels. You don't see that on these later machines. There's a lot less money in the industry about the 1960s. So bikes are being built down to a cost, but that doesn't mean that the build quality is terrible, because it's not. I mean, the build quality on these old Triumphs on 60s bikes is pretty good actually, probably better than you would find in a 1970s British bike, where obviously the companies are about to go under. Gearbox is quite nice to use, quite small movements, very positive. You can feel it sort of notching in. I mean, you don't get generally a lot of false neutrals in these boxes. Once they're in there, you know, they stay in and they're quite nicely engaged. So it's quite a nice positive gearbox. Controls are about as simple as you get. You've got a horn, you've got a choke. This is going to slip in a little bit, I'm going to have to adjust that. And you've got obviously your brake and your clutch levers. And you've got your lights, dipping maybe, just there. But that's it, there's no indicators, nothing like that. Now you can fit indicators pretty much to any bike you like really, there's no reason not to if you're worried about that sort of thing. And it's fairly simple to fit them to these bikes. These of course being 12 volts, which is rather nice. But obviously with a bike this old, electrical problems do tend to be your main source of problems. Major mechanical issues do not occur very often on these old bikes, to be honest. They're quite lowly tuned, they're pretty solid and reliable. You know, it's some of the very late bikes where they were trying to extract far too much power from the design. You know, you can get problems. But to be honest, you don't tend to get major mechanicals on bikes like this, in reality. Cruising along there about 55, it's very pleasant. Same distance, reasonably comfortable. I think if you're very tall, you're going to tend to get cramp in your legs because your feet are kind of slightly forward of you, and the bike is very small. Power on these engines isn't bad actually. It's, you know, 35 horsepower thereabouts isn't too bad. You're still going to be getting 30 odd even today. Lose a lot over the years, but maintained. It's quite a lazy engine. Makes reasonable torque for what is only 500 cc's. Let's not forget. You know, it's not a huge monster, but it does make reasonably good torque. So it's quite an easy bike to get along with. And they make an excellent first classic, there's no doubt about that.
Whatever bikes or collections of bikes, what would you like to see us cover in a future video? Maybe you've got a bike we can use for a test ride, either way get in touch below. Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, thanks for watching.